gonna talk to you about something I get a lot of questions about. I like using spin equipment a lot, and I'm almost always, I want to say almost always, but 80% of the time I'm going to be using Braid, the Fluorocarbon Leader. And one reason that I use Braid, we've already talked about this, but I'll kind of run you through some of the reasons I use Braid. Most of the time, Braid's going to be low stretch. I get better hook sets. I'm using light line when I'm using spinning equipment, so not having to put a lot of stank on my hook set, and I can use a real set to get that penetration. I get longer casts. Braid lasts longer. It's more versatile. I can have one rod and instantly go from 8 to 6 to 10 or 12 pound test line using Braid to Fluorocarbon. So there's a lot of benefits of using a Braid to Fluorocarbon on your spinning equipment. In my opinion, it's just the way to go, especially when you're talking about using baits where you have to just set the hook on it. But the question at hand here is, how long should your leader length be? For me, it's real simple. This is gonna be a really quick video. What I do is I take my fluorocarbon spool, whatever you're using. Of course, I use all Seaguar. I use either 10, 15, or 20 pound test braided line on all my spinning equipment. I'll use 10 pound tests when I'm fishing vertical, not necessarily making a cast, or if I'm just flipping out. I feel like it comes off the spool really fast. If I'm using something light, it's gonna be the 10 pound test braid. If I'm casting stick baits, shaky heads, Ned rig, I like to use 15 or 20 pound tests. You use what's comfortable. Whatever's good for you is good for me. But for as my fluorocarbon leader, I like to use Seaguar Grand Max is what I like to use. Of course, you guys don't have to use that. Tatsu, Invisex, all of those are great fluorocarbon lines to use as leader material. But it's real simple how I choose my leader length, and I'll tell you why I do it. I'll take my spool of line. This is how I choose my leader length right here. I'll take my spool of line, I'll pull it out like this, and I'll go 1, long as I can, as I can reach, and I'll go 2. That's it. Take my scissors and I'll cut it. And I attach all my Braid to Fluoro with Alberto knot. And if you look in the description box of this video, you'll see a link to how I use this, how I tie with the Alberto knot. And that gives me about probably about 5 or 6 foot of leader material. And why I like that leader material that long is this. A lot of guys like a really long leader. I'm not a big fan of that. I don't like to have my knot inside of my reel. That just, all it does when I go to make a cast, sometimes my line will get caught up in the knot. Even though the Alberto knot's a lot slim, it's very slim knot, it's still gonna catch. When you go to make a cast, if you're using a really light lure, which typically you are with spinning equipment, it's gonna catch. And that's just gonna make me very frustrated. I'm not gonna be a happy fisherman that day. So I like for my leading material, my knot to stop on when I go back to make a cast somewhere around between the first and second guide in the rod. That's where I like it. And that's how I choose my leader length. It's real simple, nothing real complicated. I think that's the way you should go if you're using Braid to Fluorocarbon. Another good question about line when you're talking about spinning reels is, when do you need to use Braid to Fluoro? And like I said, there's a 20 or 30% time where I go straight fluorocarbon. So when is that? When I'm casting around moving baits or reaction baits on spinning gear, that's when I'm gonna go straight up fluorocarbon. So if I'm throwing a small swim bait, if I'm gonna be throwing, sometimes I'll throw a jerk bait or a crank bait, that's when I'm gonna use mono or fluorocarbon straight up on my spinning reel. Here's why. I've kind of learned over time, I like when I'm making long casts and whipping that bait constantly all day. Obviously with a moving bait, you're gonna be making more casts, more presentations. And I'm not really crazy about having that knot slip through my guides over and over and over through the course of a day. Of course, using Braid is pretty abrasion resistant, but I just don't like having that knot go continuously through my guides constantly through a day of fishing. I feel like I just got a little bit more control over my cast with mono or fluorocarbon on my spinning rod. I can stop the line, it doesn't exit the reel quite as fast, there's a little bit more control, so I can be a little bit more accurate. If I want to flip, a lot of times I like to flip a drop shot in holes in the grass and stuff like that. I'm going to go straight fluorocarbon or straight mono on that. Casting a crankbait, that just gives me a little bit more control and it desensitizes the rod. So fish are real bad about nipping at a swim bait. They'll come up to it and just mouth at it. What that does with fluorocarbon or mono, that's going to desensitize my rod. So I'm not going to be quite as jumpy when he comes up and as Bobby Barrett says, whooshes the bait. When he comes up and just makes that bait lose its track a little bit, I'm not going to be quite as jumpy. And that's why I like to use the fluorocarbon or straight up mono on my spinning reel on reaction baits. So if you're going to be fishing reaction baits, go fluorocarbon, mono, that's my preference. If you're using baits where you need to set the hook on it, shaky head, if you're going to use a shaky head, a Ned rig, a drop shot, anything that you're going to have to reel down, you feel the bite, and you set the hook, I suggest that you go with braid to fluorocarbon. Use your leading length how you like it, but for me, it's this much. 1, 2. That's how much leading line I use. It's real simple. I hope that makes sense to you, and hope it'll help you catch more fish.